Of course, Sindy Mabe is in Vilakazi Street at Sakumzi Restaurant. We are commemorating 47 years already, can you believe it, of the uprising of June 16, 1976. Sindy, what do you have?
William, thank you again, and to our viewers, if you've just joined us, it's really an incredible moment. I wish I could share the emotions via the airwaves and on screen, but it's something that reminds you of the incredible journey that South Africa has traveled, the dark past and where we are, and the hope and aspirations that we have that are manifested in the number of young leaders that we've seen come through the ranks, including musicians who had really blazed the trail to highlight the plight of South Africa at the time, to bring us to this champion nation. I'd like to believe, Sipho, that we are a champion nation. Now, we are here with a multi-award-winning activist, an author, a scholar himself, Sipho Hotstix Mabuse. It's a privilege indeed, Sipho. I don't take it for granted. Yes, we are friends and all those good things, but nonetheless, your humility and also your stature, I mean, the balance there of what keeps you so grounded.
Thank you, Sindy, and thank you to your viewers. Firstly, you started the wrong way. I'm not an activist. I'm a musician first before I can be an activist.
Got you.
You know, being an activist is incidental. It's probably even by default. You know, I guess coming back to your question, I've always believed that to be able to stay grounded, one needs to focus, one needs to self-introspect. You know, what is my role in society? And how do I generate confidence? How do I generate trust from people? You know, so that, I think that's one thing that has probably kept me grounded, and I've always wanted to believe that I can make better contributions if I was more grounded in being able to interact with things that a lot of people are not able to do.
Yeah. But now, just going back to your name, Hotstix, or your, what shall we call it, an alias. It was because of your prowess on the drums. And I mean, you are multi-instrumentalist. And also very meticulous when it comes not only to your compositions, it has meaning and significance. It's, you know, the song Burnout, for example, has become almost an anthem in its own when it speaks about how the country was on the verge of exploding, and yet it does have a up-tempo beat to it, which is more celebratory. But you've written so much more that reflects the history of this country.
Well, you know, at that time when I wrote Burnout, I didn't even realize what it meant to the people. But I think it was just as important to highlight the fact that we had to find ways of being how could I say, trying to find ways of hiding some of the things that we want to say. You know, express ourselves in a particular way, so that, but people understood what we were saying, because people were in a revolutionary mood. So anything that related to what, you know, what was happening at that, be it burn, be it fire, be it stone, you know, those things became part of how we, you know, would generate interest in the struggle at a particular time. And through music we were able to make songs. I mean, people like Chico, they would be writing songs like We Miss You Manelo. Now, if you understood what that means, you'd know. Obviously, the whole thing was to hide, you know, stuff from the authority, lest we get imprisoned or killed in the process.
And that was the reality, you know, the brutality of the apartheid system and police force, the fact that they were literally hunting down as if you were a prey, those that were in defiance of the system. How do we contextualize that particular history to young people who have no recollection? They don't have hang-ups about apartheid, the past laws, and you know, the derogatory terms that you were called, etc. How do we contextualize it in their digital, modern knowledge era?
You know, earlier on, you and I had a little conversation outside, and one of the saddest things about our young people is not interacting with reading material. It's all in the book. It's all in the books. The material is out there. It's for us to go to the libraries. It's for us to interact with people who had the experience and read and get more information so that they know. Otherwise, one of the things also is the fact that we have not played a critical role in ensuring that our people have the knowledge. It must start at schools. It must begin at the very lowest, Children can only know what they are taught. And if we don't educate them about things about the past, how do they know? How would they know 100 years from now on who Nelson Mandela was? Because we didn't teach them, at the very early age. How would they know who Tsietsi Mashinini was? And what did he do? I mean, you were saying the other, do you know who Tsietsi Mashinini is? I said, who is that? Is it how our children are going to respond to important history?
Okay, and I understand that it's a collective, and yes, the education system does play a big role in it, but there also needs to be a desire. We're also mentioning the fact that knowing who you are, your origin, and what your greatness is, it's thakazelo, and being proud of your identity, your heritage, I think, which is something has been lost. We've been grappling even with just our languages, to ensure that it enjoys equal or equitable attention in society. We are here, Sakumzi, which is a family-friendly, beautiful restaurant, Vilakazi Street in itself, where the historical events happen, the tragedy.
You ran away when you were supposed to run out with me.
So Sakumzi was supposed to be one of the dancers in the videos, but there were so many others that came through the ranks of young people. I think it was Tompies and all of those.
Working with young people at that time is still a privilege. We don't appreciate how we can learn from the young and how we can educate them so that it becomes evolutionary. It advances knowledge, because knowledge is derived from those who understand, those who can pass it on.
Yes.
And if we don't do that, if we don't pass on the baton, then we have a problem.
And learn from other nations. I think in the planning diary meetings, what we were appealing to as eNCA and the South African Morning is for South Africans to embrace in our multiculturalism, in our diversity, that these events are not necessarily just for a certain sector or, part of society, that it is for all of us, be it black, colored, white, Indian, etc. Do you get a sense that we are embracing these kind of days?
Sadly not. Recently I came across a clip where, I don't like to use the word colored, where, and rightly so, colored people feel that they are being marginalized. And if one lives within that society, one can experience, that we haven't done as much for the so-called colored community as we should have. There seemed to be a sense, and Don Matera lamented that quite a lot, where he said, when during apartheid, I was not colored enough, I was not white enough, and now during liberation, after liberation, I'm not black enough. Where do I belong? And it's true. When there's that sense of marginalization from a particular section of our community, then we need to take stock about what this freedom is about.
Yes, but how do you deconstruct something that was intentional and engineered so that we are classified in our racial context to try and now say we are united? In other words, apartheid had made it very clear that you live separately from each other. You are black, you are colored, you Indian, you white, and now we try and unite it over a 30-year democratic process.
Conscientious leadership must be practical. We need leaders that are conscious of what their role is about. How do we change the narrative? How do we induce from ourselves what we want people to look at us as? If leadership is not conscious and be aware of our surroundings and what is going on, we're not going to change that. The deliberation by the Nationalist Party was deliberate. Why can't we be deliberate about breaking that narrative?
And the deliberation, or rather the intent of the Nationalist Party, as you were saying, while we celebrate days like your Heritage Day, I think it's 24th of September, and we say, and then, you know, others are Zulu, Tonga, etc. It was at that time intended to divide and rule, but now we are able to appreciate each other's identity and cultures without necessarily, you know, encroaching on other cultures. Why is it we're not able to do that across the racial lines, is my question.
It's all about consciousness. If we don't have the kind of leadership that is conscious of people's value and how we can change, you know, I mean, I know, you know, now recently, if you have leadership where people would be saying, yes, I am Zulu, but how do I define my Zuluness? Do I define my Zuluness in terms of my tribalization in isolation of others, or I am proud of being Zulu within the African context? We need to define that. We need to have that type of understanding. If we don't do that, we're going to remain a divided people based on our tribal enclaves.
Okay, the balance again. We young people are saying, look, we understand there had been many sacrifices that were made. Blood was shed, and we don't take that for granted. But this is our reality, you know, and we feel there are too many other moving targets, or, you know, we're being spoken to and not necessarily included in trying to find solutions to your perennial social ills, i.e. unemployment, poverty, inequality, etc.
Let me speak from a musician's perspective. You know, in most of the times when I speak about the role that we play, young people must begin to chart their own path. Generation after generation made decisions as to not in our lifetime. Nelson Mandela's generation had its own path that it charted. It didn't say this is how we are going to impose to the young people how they see themselves. 1976, that generation, Hotso and so on, were not dictated to by what the past had been. They understood that they had to chart a path for themselves. And the only way they can do it is by understanding the past. However, understanding that past, it was important that they will chart their own, and they'll chart it their own way. Nobody went to CAC and said, here's the baton, go with it. All they said that, not in our lifetime. Nelson Mandela said the same thing. So did Steve Biko, not in our lifetime. Young people today have to say, what are the challenges that we are faced with? And how do we navigate ourselves through those processes and ensure that through our music, through our activism, we deal with the things that are affecting us currently.
Yeah. You speak of being present. In other words, understanding not only what your mandate is, but your own purpose while we are alive. What is it that you bring to the table? But in all of it, being aware, you know, one, education, the history, two, what do you do with your current circumstances? In other words, you need a thought process that takes place in changing our circumstances. But there's parts of celebrations that we miss as South Africans, perhaps, even in the challenges that we're facing. Sipho, your hope for South Africa, for Youth Day, what is it that you think could have been done better, or that we still have an opportunity to achieve?
You know, I always like to live with hope. I'm always hopeful. And as adults, we should not dictate to how young people recognize or celebrate or commemorate things which they feel close. However, we can only share our experiences. And what they do with those experiences is up to them, whether they will embrace or discard. And however we want to say, chart a path in which the future will be palatable for those who come after you.
And before we let you go, and thank you again for your time, it would be remiss of us not to mention young people across the country as a build-up that culminated in June 16 here on Vilakazi Street in 1976. If you can reflect, I know you're going to Ekurhuleni a little bit later, but to also acknowledge all the other contributors to our liberation, not just focusing on the events of Soweto in 1976.
In a way, I've been privileged to have interacted with many of the young people. One of the people that I strongly feel should have been part of this is a young gentleman called Musala Mosenyoke. He wrote a book called Soweto Explodes, and I'm sure that you'll probably be talking to him somewhere along the lines. And yes, young people all over South Africa, all over the country had been affected by June 16th. It is a very important day where let them reflect. We know that they were not there, but it's important for them to reflect and ask themselves the question to say, what happened then? Because if they don't ask the questions, they will not know. They must ask and say, why is it every time, every year, there is the deliberate discussion around this particular day, June 16th? What does it mean? If you say to the young Afrikaner people, what is it all about? They will tell you. Because the parents have educated them about what it means to be part of that monument. So we also have to create monuments that our children can always be looking to and saying, on June 16th, apparently there were so many young people who died. Why did they die? Then they will find the answers. If they don't interrogate their experiences themselves, there's nothing much that many of us can do to infuse that.
All right, Sipho, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you indeed. And of course, this is the book that you were making reference to, Soweto Explode. We will be having the privilege of speaking to the author. We also have Portia Modise, who was a former Banyana player, having scored 100 international goals. She'll be our guest in a bit. Really a pleasure and privilege. Thank you indeed for joining us.